That's better. Good. Thank you, everyone. So I was thinking about doing this presentation. I've done something like this a few times. And one of the things that I was thinking about is that the way that we respond to something like a diagnosis of ovarian cancer or having someone we love have a diagnosis is very much influenced by the people around us and what we read and hear. And so I thought, given that it's late, I would attempt to do a lot of this talk using greeting cards. Because greeting cards really do influence, if you look at the history of what greeting cards say, they kind of show you what society thinks should be said to people who are facing various things in their life. Having said that, there's some new great ones that have come out that are a response, a reaction to that. So we'll see how we go. But I'll start with this one that says that there is no good card for this. I'm so sorry. So my aim is to maybe explain what we understand is the big impact of having your life turned upside down. So the psychological processes we go through. And that's helpful because then we kind of understand, okay, that's why I feel like this or that's why I'm responding in this way. But it doesn't mean that I can take away the trauma. So there's nothing that I can particularly say that's going to make it okay. But hopefully what we can do is look at maybe understanding it in a better way and giving some control back. So the reality is that regardless of whether you get a good diagnosis, that you get treatment offered early, that you have lots of positive things happen, your life is turned upside down. And it's turned upside down from whatever moment it hits you, excuse me, whether it's the moment the doctor says or the moment that you get called back for a test or whatever happens, or that your loved one tells you the news. Your life is turned upside down. And so the first process is, how do I manage all the stuff I've got to do when my life has been turned upside down? And the first thing that I think we really underestimate is that we go into shock. And shock is a fantastic thing that happens. It's a defence mechanism. And what it does is it protects us when we have been handed something that is so big that inside we go, oh God, this is really scary. I've had, in the last 5 years, I've had 4 close family members die. And when the second one and the third one happened and I heard about it, I remember thinking, I know what this is like I've still myself. You've got to hold on because this is going to hurt. And then you go and do what you've got to do. It's that shock that happens that enables us to then go and talk about treatment and go through the processes and make those horrible phone calls and tell loved ones and make decisions about work and all that stuff, when inside we're going, oh, goodness me, this is just the most terrible thing. And so shock it's a physical reaction. So for some people they just go cold, or they can't think straight, they can't remember anything for a while, or they get really hot, or they can't sleep, or they don't want to see people. Or they need to talk all the time. So there's lots of different ways that we process it, but it hangs around for a while. And if you know someone, or if you yourself has had a grief, you see someone and they go through the motions of they're at the funeral and they've organised it, and everyone goes, aren't they amazing? Look, gee, they're holding up really well, aren't they? And then a few weeks later, they're unable to get out of bed, and that's because the shock's worn off. We often say in the profession of caring for people that it's about 6 weeks, and it's when the flowers are starting to die that we need to follow people up, because that's the shock starting to wear off. And it was really useful, got you through all that public stuff, but now it's hitting you. And it's hitting you at a point where you probably can start to deal with it, but we underestimate that shock. And the concept of being shell-shocked, which obviously came from the war and people who went through major trauma, is that we get triggered about that shock at different times. So people who, when they have a smell that reminds them of the hospital, or whatever it is, and it comes back, So it's that that shock can really just, it stays with us and we remember, we come back to it. And I use the term trauma very specifically and purposefully because I think, again, we underestimate, we don't talk about it enough, that having a diagnosis of ovarian cancer is traumatic. And then the things that happen afterwards are pretty traumatic too. And they're traumatic for everyone close to that woman, because I think cancer comes into a family. And I use the term family very loosely. Whoever loves them and is close to them, it comes and it just ripples through. So you have a lot of post-traumatic responses. One of them is shell shock. And then during that time, in terms of what should be expected of yourself, it's pretty much you just got to put one foot in front of the other. And we really need to be reminding ourselves of this and reminding our loved ones of this. It's enough just to get out of bed, go through the motions of the day, and know that this will pass and you'll be able to get back. You'll be able to do more than one thing a day at some point. But when you're in that process of shock, it's enough just to get through the day and to be told and supported that if this is going to end, this is going to get better. But that while you're in that process, of course, that's how you're going to feel. This card says, I know this day really sucks for you. I'm thinking of you. And I should say, a lot of these cards that kind of hit the mark are from a woman called Emily McDowell. And you can find her online, emilymcdowell.com. And she produced these cards because there wasn't anything useful out there to say what she wanted to say. But I think there are some days when it just sucks. So we can talk about some of the things we can do to manage anxiety and uncertainty and those sorts of things, but there are some days when it's just horrible and it's too hard and you don't want to have to put on a smile and you don't want to have to face people, and that's all right too. So the really important thing is being able to actually just understand what's happening. That's crucial, because then otherwise you go, I'm going crazy. Yesterday I was fine, today I can't get out of bed, whatever. So you need to understand this process of adjustment. But equally, we need to be able to give ourselves this support and be okay. You know, it's self-compassion. And we need to be reminding each other of this as well. This one says, when people say it's a marathon, not a sprint, I don't think they get how much you hate running. So one of the things that we know about managing trauma is that we need to pace ourselves. And so if you're a marathon runner, I'm clearly not, but if you're a marathon runner, I hear, what you do is you go, okay, I've got this far to go, so I don't put everything into the first bit. I'm going to pace myself, and I know, because I have to get to this bit. And that's fine if you've had a discrete trauma. So if you've had a car accident and you had some injuries and those injuries are going to be fixed and you go through it, and yes, it's horrible and you have to recover emotionally and physically and financially from it, but there's an end in that. When you have cancer or someone you love has cancer, you don't know when the end bit's going to be, or when the bit comes where you go, okay, I can get back into whatever was normal, or what this life is now. And so it's really tricky to pace yourself. And there's some clues I have about maybe how we manage in spite of it. This one says, I know there's no normal to go back to, but I'm here to help you build a new one, and I'll bring snacks. So these are the kind of friends we really need, isn't it? I understand that there is this deep desire that I just want to get back to the week before I knew, or the day before, or I just want to go back. And it's actually probably, if we had to really define it, I just want to get back to the time when I had peace of mind, or I wasn't coping with all of this stuff. The reality is that it's not going to ever be the way it was. It could be better. So it's not that life's over and you're doomed and you're going to worry forever, But we know that life looks different for whatever reason. It's because you've had to look at the world differently than you ever did. And so there's no normal to go back to. Doesn't mean it's going to be bad. But to have people that can cope with that and support you in that and go, I know things are going to change. I know that you want to now, that you're questioning, why one of your dear friends still hasn't rung, or you're not sure whether you want to keep doing the work you do or whatever's happening. But I'm here for you, and I'm still here even if you've changed a bit. Even if you now don't say yes to everything, I still love you and I'm here. That's great when you have that. We know that doesn't happen with everyone, but it would be good if it did. This is one of the great vintage cards. Hi, feeling better? You could almost put it as an exclamation mark, because it's like, hi, tell me you're feeling better. This is a really common thing. It's almost like when we bump into people and they really want you to tell them that you're feeling better and it's going to be okay, and they don't want to hear that actually, no, you're still not feeling well. And yeah, that's amazing. Yes, it was a year ago, but I'm still not feeling well. I'm still dealing with stuff. But that concept is alive and well, even if that's a really old card. How to be happy through ill, which is really bad grammar, but also, this idea of it must be so great because you get to, read all the books you wanted to, be in bed and just rest, and, isn't that fantastic? And of course, it's not like that at all, and it's not like that even if you're feeling physically okay because of all the stuff that's going on in your mind. But there are these beliefs around us in terms of what it's like to go through this kind of experience. And of course, what's behind a lot of this is this idea that you're not allowed to think negatively, and you really have to think positively. Now, this comes from a couple of places. One of those places is this deep desire that you're not going to tell me something really scary, because actually this is very confronting for me. I'm sorry, it's really confronting. I know you're living it, but I don't want to hear that actually bad things happen, and I'm not quite ready to deal with that. But it particularly came from some studies that were done in the early 70s. And they were not very good studies, but they basically looked at people, and they counted how many stresses they had in their life, and then they looked at how many of the people that had most stresses had cancer, and they went, there must be a correlation between life stress and cancer. And then out of that came some books that were really grabbed, sometimes these things are really grabbed, that said we need to learn how to deal with stress so we don't get cancer. And if we do get cancer, we have to be very good at dealing with stress, or else it'll come back. And so what that did was that, first of all, it put on the shoulders of everyone who has cancer that it's up to you to make sure this doesn't come back, and actually it's probably your fault as well because you didn't deal with that stuff. And it was either that you got angry, especially that you're an angry woman, or that you didn't deal with stress for whatever happened. The reality is that if most of us in this room, if most of us out in one of the shops looked at how many people have had a loss in their life, or lost their job, or their parents broke up, or they had to move house, all the things that are in the top 10 of stress, the majority of people have had those happen. So there was no real correlation. And the fact is, if you have something that comes along and turns your life upside down, the most normal thing in the world is for you to be stressed about that, and distressed about that, and not happy about that. And for anyone to expect you to be positive all the time about that is crazy, and adds to what you have to actually deal with. But it's still alive and well. And it comes out even in really subtle things of, but isn't it great that you, have a really great team that's looking after you, or isn't it great you've got that lovely husband, or, it's almost like but you've got to focus on some positives. It's really not helpful. Very cool 70s one, but that's what it is. We don't want the bad vibes. We'd love you to come for dinner, but we don't really want to talk about your cancer. We don't want the bad vibes. And the all-time favourite. But you look good. You really are looking good. That's, yeah. This is one of the responses you can have to you don't look sick. You could say, you don't look stupid, guess we're both wrong. But actually, it is Grumpy Cat. Oh, Grumpy Cat died. I know, I heard that. Yeah. That's right. That's right, cats died. He was old. This actually does remind me to say, though, one of the things that I do a lot with people who are, I don't know, they're going back to work or they're starting to, they're going to a family wedding or something, and they're actually thinking, this is what I'm really scared of. I'm scared that people are going to come and say, so tell me how it's all going, or isn't it great, or, whatever the scary thing is, I don't know how to respond. And I'm either going to go, yeah, it's fine, and I feel like that's disingenuous, or I won't swear, but you might go, please go away with that comment. It's really good to practice your response to these. So if you find, and lots of people do find, that people say to them, you look good, but you're looking really good, actually practice some responses to that. And they can be very compassionate responses, because people are generally saying these things because they want us to be okay. So we have to just take a breath and go, I know I'm the one living with this, but I need to have compassion for this person. So whatever the response is that you practice so it doesn't throw you, that works for you, it is actually a good idea to do that. I'm so sorry you're sick. I want you to know that I will never try to sell you some random treatment I read about on the internet. And yet most people have lots of people who do. And it might be not something that they read on the internet, but it's something that they heard that their neighbour's sister, who had a different cancer to you, but she tried this apricot kernel thing and it really worked. It's actually, apricot kernels have arsenic in them. Please don't try it. Again, I think that the advice that we seem to get from so many different people is a sign of I want the best for you. And again, it's something that we need to think about how we respond to it, because otherwise we take it on and we go, gosh, another one, and maybe I shouldn't have a break from treatment at the moment. Maybe I should do this. It's really important to get to a point where you feel very confident with your treating team and your choices that you're making about how to look after yourself, and get to a point where that is so strong that these comments can't shake you, and you go, thank you so much, it's really nice of you to make that suggestion. I'm actually fine at the moment with what I'm doing. It's not easy sometimes though. Okay, so the impact is that we get thrown upside down, and a bit like you're in a snowy bubble. I always remember a patient telling me, it was actually a young man who came into oncology, but not thinking he was going to get a cancer diagnosis. So he came in on his own and he wasn't prepared at all. And he walked out of St Vincent's Hospital and he went to the park, and he said it was like the grass was blue and the sky was green, and everyone else was walking around like it was normal. I mean, it's that complete just turn your life upside down. So let's think about what the impact that might be. Some of the really common things we know. One of them is that anxiety girl comes into our life, if she wasn't already there, able to jump to the worst conclusion in a single bound. That we sometimes, this is a great old one, we feel like we have just been, who doesn't know what a wringer is? I'm thinking you might not. Do you know what a wringer is? No, yes. That was terrible that I pointed him out, because he's so lovely that he has driven his partner into here. So a wringer is this old-fashioned thing that used to happen before we had great washing machines, and you would wash, you'd either hand wash, and then you would put the wet clothes and you'd wring them through. It was like, God, women's jobs 20 years ago was very full on, and it would squeeze all the water out, and then it would be easier to dry them. And sometimes it can feel like we have been put through the wringer. We have had to deal with the pain of the people that we love and the way they look at us and the people around us, the physical things that have happened, how we're feeling, with the medication that we're on, the fear, the anxiety, all that stuff. Sometimes we just really feel like we've been through the ringer. And this one, which is really, it's really understandable to feel this, and that is, I miss the old me, I miss the happy me, everything has changed. I don't believe that that is the way it stays, but I totally understand that's how it feels sometimes. And of course we know that, as I said, cancer happens to a family. It impacts on everyone, impacts on little ones, whether they are grandchildren or children or nieces and nephews or friends. It comes into a household and a family, and I think we really don't acknowledge that enough as healthcare teams. We don't say, what can we do for all of you? How is this impacting all of you? And we know it impacts everyone very differently. It impacts everyone, and yet often we only give information to the patient. We only answer their questions, we only offer them support, and actually it's affecting everyone. One of the things that we know about partners is that the evidence shows that if you could measure the impact of a cancer diagnosis, and there's lots of bits that go into that, the physical impact, the worry, the finances, all that sort of stuff, it's about at least the same for most partners and patients, and for some studies have shown that partners it's actually higher. And one of the reasons for that is that if you get a diagnosis and it feels pretty out of control for you, but it's in your body and you're going and you're getting the treatment and people are giving you information, and you're a partner, if you're a close partner and you're going through all of that, you're going to yourself, okay, I'm not sleeping, but it's not as bad as what's going on for her, and I've got all these questions, but actually it's not about me, and I'm dealing with everyone else's stuff. So that's probably why. But we know that whilst partners, even the really close ones that go through, and the partners at every treatment and every doctor's appointment, and they've gone through the whole thing, they've had very different experiences. And I get couples referred to me when treatment ends all the time. And the first thing I do is say, let's talk about how this was for you and how this was for you, because they were different. And it's important that we acknowledge that. So how do we start to get back some balance? And I'm saying this in the context of knowing that uncertainty is there, whether we like it or not. It's not that we were given an end and it's all over now, and now how do we get balance? We have to get the balance in spite of the uncertainty. So there are three big concepts I want to talk to you about and break down so we might be able to cope with them better. And the first one is anxiety, which is almost universal because you've been given uncertainty. So anxiety is about uncertainty with powerlessness. And we can't fix the uncertainty, but we can fix the powerlessness in how we actually manage it. And there's obviously lots of different ways we can do that. Let me read you this quote. Don't think about what can happen in a month. Don't think about what can happen in a year. Just focus on the 24 hours in front of you and do what you can to get closer to where you want to be. Now, this is not a quote in relation to cancer. It's a statement, and it's not a new concept, but it's one that we really have to learn. It's actually about how we probably all should be living life, and that is that if we think too far ahead, we have no idea what is ahead of us. Actually, none of us know what's going to happen tomorrow, but I can still kid myself. I've never had cancer. I can still kid myself that I have a whole lot of control about what's going to happen tomorrow. And when you've had the rug pulled from under you, that's very hard to do. And so when you start going, well, you know, what's going to happen with this Christmas, and what about next Christmas, and what, you know, can I plan a holiday, and should we go away now, and all that stuff that happens. You need to pull back to where you feel like I do have some control. And there may be some days when that is, I feel like I can plan until lunchtime, on the really bad days. Or I feel like it would be okay for me to make some plans. In a couple of weeks, we might go away for the weekend. And that feels okay. But anything, into next month just I don't feel like I can go that far ahead. And of course, at different times it might be, from scan to scan or until treatment finishes or whatever it is. It changes all the time. But when things start to feel out of control and you're doing that ruminating, and what about this person and that, and am I going to be able to do this, you pull it back. And the reality is that if we don't do that, we're not actually living now, because we're worried about yesterday and tomorrow. It sounds like a really simple concept. It is life-changing if you can do it. And of course it's about being here now. So I'll tell you something slightly humorous. I have two daughters, a 20-year-old and a 17-year-old. And I live in Tasmania most of the time. And last night, so my 20-year-old, who used to live with her boyfriend of 3 years a few houses down, broke up with him a little while ago. And he had a big birthday party in the few houses down last night. And the 17-year-old went to the party. And she didn't tell her sister. I knew she'd gone. And her sister came up at one point and went, "Oh, where's Ella?" And I go, "She's gone to the party." So they've had the biggest fight last night, continued into the morning, continued when I spoke to them in the cab coming from Tullamarine to here. It'll be okay. They have a great dad, and they will deal with it. But I could be thinking about that right now. And if I did that, I would miss the fact that you guys have been so courageous to be here, to sit through all the stuff you've done, a lot that I'm sure has been really confronting for you personally, to come here on a Saturday, to be here late. I would miss that if I was talking to you by rote, thinking about the girls and which one's going to hurt each other more because of this terrible sistery thing that happened. We need to be here now or we miss the amazing things that are happening in our life. Okay, so I'm going to give you some of the kind of summary points while showing you photos of Tasmania. Okay, so this is the Aurora Australis. This is one of the things you can see if you live in Tasmania. Happens every year a number of times. So decide what time frame you can cope with. It changes all the time, and only focus on that. Stop yourself when you're getting too far ahead, because all that stuff that there's no answer for, you need to go, no, I'm not going to do that, and bring it back to now, to what I can focus on. Okay, the other thing about anxiety is that we have this constant way of jumping to bad conclusions. We have automatic negative thoughts. As human beings, that's what we do. It's unhelpful, and we need to learn how to control them. So what happens is that we have a situation, we have a thought in the way that we appraise that, and that brings us an emotion and then a behaviour. So this happens constantly with all the things that happen in our life. I'm going to give you an example. Oh, let me go back. Okay, so a situation might be that someone important to you says something really negative, some really negative things about you. You know, she used to be really, I thought she'd be much stronger when she was facing this, but, I've heard she's not coping very well. Okay, so what happens is you've heard this, and you jump to the negative thought, which is up the top here. I'm no good, I don't do anything right, nobody likes me. That's a fairly extreme one, but it can happen. Now, we don't tend to think about it in those words. We just have that it's way back here. It probably comes from, when we were 9 and at school or whatever. So we jump to a conclusion. And because of that, we have an emotional response. So we feel down, we feel upset, we feel helpless. And then we have a physical sensation. It might be that you feel your stomach feels bad, you feel jittery. I get tense shoulders, and eventually I get a headache. Often I don't realise that the things happen until I get the headache. And because I've kind of practiced this a lot, I go, okay, why have I got a headache? And I go backwards and I go, oh, that's right, that thought happened. And the behaviour then, of course, comes, and it might be that you stop going out. You stay in bed all day, you stop trying new things. Okay, let me give you another one. So, the trigger might be that you are hanging the washing out and you start to feel like you've got a sore shoulder. So the thought is, I'll know the cancer spread. I haven't felt that before. Oh my God, what is it? That's terrible. Feeling is start to breathe, fast, heart rate goes up. Behaviour is possibly you retreat. You go, that's it, drop the washing, go to bed, can't face it, it's too scary. And you avoid maybe going to the next appointment with the oncologist. I can't tell you how many times that's happened. That's not me exaggerating. What we need to learn to do is to be able to challenge these thoughts, because they just happen like that, and they get out of hand. So we might start by changing the thought. So we stop and we go, hang on a minute, what's going on? Getting all panicked, I've got a sore shoulder, I need to stop and really question that thought. It's called challenging automatic negative thoughts. So there's lots of reasons why my shoulder could be sore. I should address it and move on. The way that we deal with the physical reaction to stress is that we do the opposite thing. So if you get stressed, when you get stressed, you breathe fast. You need to learn how to go, slow down, start breathing slowly. If you get this happening, which happens to me, I go, let's do that, let's do this. Sometimes I go, I need to go and get a massage. So whatever it is for you, you need to try and reverse it. And then you might go, okay, what am I going to do about this? Well, I'm going to go, I've got a sore shoulder, I'm going to address it, I'm going to use some mild painkiller, I'm going to put a heat pack on it, I'm going to monitor it for a couple of days or until tomorrow, or if it worsens or whatever, I will then go and see the doctor. I've taken control of it. I haven't run away from it. Sorry, I'm not sure why my throat's going sore. I'll give you another one. It's a really common one. You're due for another scan. Now this one, I'm jumping straight to the feeling, and that's because often we don't realise the thought bit that's happening. So you're finding that you're feeling really tense, you've got a headache, and you're not sleeping very well, and you're snapping at everyone. And the impact is that everything's tense, you feel like you're not coping. The thought was, I've got to go and have another scan. It's going to show that the cancer's back and the treatment hasn't worked, or I'm going to have that anxiety again. So what can you do about this? You can go, I notice I'm snapping at everyone. Stop and think why, and make a plan to address it. Change the thought. So you go, okay, this is a scheduled part of my care. Goodness me. There's a reason why we do scans in the time frame that we do it. There's been a whole lot of research done into that. We know that doing it any sooner is not going to help. Doing it later is not going to help. And so it's really just a part of what I've got to actually go through. And you might plan for it. So you go, okay, the scan's coming up. I know I'm going to have a bad day. I need to either be around people, not be around people, whatever. And just so you know, it's a recognised thing. It's really common. So it might be that you actually say, I have a scan coming up. I'm sorry, I'm in a really bad mood. It's coming up, I'm scared. I'm going to be scared until I've finished. Or until I get the results back. Sometimes it's not the scan, it's the waiting for the results. And so I'm just going to explain that to everyone. You need to just, give me a wide berth. Dear me. Okay. So this is the bridge at the Cataract Gorge. I live in Launceston, and I can't quite believe that this is like you can walk to this from town. It's incredibly beautiful. We need to learn to challenge automatic negative thoughts. It's life-changing to do this because, there are situations where all of us, commonly we find that we get stressed. If we can start to challenge it, we turn it around. Okay, the next one is about authenticity, which is about being authentically who you are. And I think that is something, if there's ever something you get out of the experience of facing cancer, it's hopefully that you grab this. Authenticity is about self-awareness, understanding the impact this is having on me, and the courage to be yourself. And so a really common one is I don't say yes to everything anymore. And I'm saying that boldly because I know how much I matter. I know how exhausted I was before this diagnosis, for example. So the first thing about this is that it's really important to kind of do a bit of a scan. And this changes all the time. So it's important to stop every now and then and go, what parts of my life has this experience negatively impacted? What parts of my life right now is it really impacting? So it might be that you say, I'm feeling really stressed, and people go, well, of course you are, because you've got ovarian cancer and you're having treatment or whatever. But actually, we need to pinpoint what is it. So if you were seeing me and you were going, I'm just overwhelmed, I'd go, let's break that down. Let's actually work out what is overwhelming you at the moment. So, sorry. Could be ongoing physical issues. It could be relationships, and we know that most people have someone in their life that they thought would be there who wasn't there. I'm not getting choked up about that. I'm actually losing my voice. I'm sorry. It could be self-image of, I feel like everyone's wanting me to be coping better with this, but I'm not, and I need to just be bold about that. Could be sexuality, body image, how I'm feeling about my body, how my relationship is with my partner. It could be mental health, and it could be work or finances, practical stuff. It's really important to pinpoint it, because then it's not this massive big thing. And then we go, okay, it's this relationship. I need to either deal with it or accept it or make contact or whatever it is. This is one of the things I hope that I have drummed into my daughters. The bravest thing you can be is yourself. Such a simple statement, and actually so many of us are carrying this idea of how we should be. To be a good girl, or to be, clever, or to go to college because you've got a really good ATAR, or whatever it is. But actually the most courageous thing we can be is ourselves, and really know who we are. And the really sad thing is how many people I know who have spent a lot of time not being themselves, but doing what they thought they should be. We need to really challenge that. This is the Tessellated pavement in Tasmania. So it's about considering how ovarian cancer has impacted you and what you need right now. Okay, so the last one is that despair, which is about the worst thing you can feel, is suffering without meaning. And this, I could spend a lot of time talking about this. I won't, it's okay, just checking the time, because I did my PhD on this, and this was one of the models that came out of it. And we were looking at the role of meaning in life for people with advanced cancer. And the first thing that we kind of found and were able to put into this model was that as human beings, we all have suffering. It's the great leveller that all of us in the room have had. And then we move into coping, so we do the things we need to do to manage, and we have meaning. And Viktor Frankl, who wrote about this and wrote some really amazing theory about this, called it the will to meaning. So he would say that as human beings, one of the things about us is that it doesn't matter how horrific we are faced with in a situation, we somehow get dragged to find meaning, maybe in the situation, but maybe just in life. So to give you an example, say you've got ongoing pain from treatment or surgery, and you wake up in the morning and you're in pain because you've had 12 hours, maybe 8 hours since you've had pain medication. So you open your eyes and you're like, I'm really in pain. I don't even want to face today, this is just going on, it's horrible. So you're in suffering. And then your partner comes in and says, okay, you know, if you get up and you have your pain medication and you have a warm shower, you feel better. So you do that. That's coping. And then a friend rings and says, you should see the autumn leaves in the park. Let's go for a little walk. And you go for a walk and you notice how beautiful the autumn leaves are and you feel very loved by this friend and you're in meaning. So we move in and out of this many times a day. Sometimes people feel like they're not coping because they're like, this morning I was really sad and then things were okay and then I was feeling really happy and grateful and then I'm back. But actually it's just a very normal response, which is why we kind of do it like this. The point of this is that we sometimes, when we're dealing with lots of suffering, we find ourselves with a life that's really saturated with suffering. And we need to rebalance it by making sure we're focusing on the meaningful things in our lives. This is a bit hard to read, but it says, what brings you joy? Go there. So I grew up on a beach on the northwest coast of Tassie, just a sandbank away from the beach. So I spent a lot of time on the beach and I relax as soon as I'm on the coast. And we lived here in North Melbourne for about 25 years. And after my father died and we went down to Tassie for the funeral and we came back and I had a couple of days off work and I was just kind of moching around the house and my husband said, let's go for a drive, and he drove me to the coast and he went, right, get out, go and sit on the beach. And the big thing about that for me, and of course I relaxed as soon as I was there, was that you forget. So we forget the things that actually make us go, oh yeah. And they're different for everyone. So it might be, for a lot of people it's the ocean or the bush or the countryside. It might be your garden. It might be particular people in your life that you go, you know, when I spend time with that person, I just feel great. They might live on the other side of the world, so make sure you give them a call or you've Skyped them. We have to actually remind ourselves of those things, because often when we get busy, they're the things that fall off, because we know the beach is nice, but we're busy doing stuff. So we actually have to start putting them back in to rebalance things. And the other thing is that we have to actually notice things. So when I was flying, and so I come to Melbourne at least every fortnight for work, and so I know the flight path really well from Launceston to Melbourne. And sometimes today it was really clear, and I often take photos. I usually sit in the window seat, often take photos, and often share them with everyone. Because whilst I've seen those views a lot of time, it's about counting the blessings. So you need to go one more step from that. So you don't just walk through a park and think, oh, I guess it's a nice day. You actually go, wow, look at that tree. Or wasn't that person great? Or isn't that dress wonderful that person's wearing? We actually need to start noticing those things and counting our blessings. I'm going to give you a couple of other examples. So I have a great niece that lives with us some of the time. She's just turned 11. And this is one of the constructions she made the other night. So it's chocolate ice cream. And it's that choc ice stuff that, goes hard when you put it on ice cream. And then she went through, we have various, things in the cupboard that you can put on cakes. And she made this, she was so excited about it, she brought it out. And it was really cool. This is how close I got to the Hoodoo Gurus when I saw them recently with my friend, and I knew all the words, so that was really cool. This is our dog. She's actually my daughter's dog. Her name's Gertie, and she's a cavoodle, so she can look like a sheep at times, so you have to have her shorn. And she recently had a haircut, and my daughter says that when she's had a haircut, her paws look like chocolate chip cookies. And she's such a joy to us because we just watch her and go, isn't she gorgeous when she's asleep? And and when I go to the beach that I grew up in, we have a little shack down there. Beach combing is just still the best thing for me. I can spend 2 hours picking up little things. This was a collection I got a few weeks ago. So this is what I mean. I'm not talking about big, grandiose meaning in life stuff, or why did I get ovarian cancer and how do I make meaning of it? It's about what are the things that bring you joy, and are you doing them? you're actually including them in your life, you probably need a higher dose of them than you've ever had, because it rebalances. Now, of course, so this says, "Dear Cancer, thank you for making me stop and listen and remember what's truly important. You can go now." So whilst this may well have pulled us up and gone, wow, I actually don't think that earning more money is necessarily the important thing. I can tell you I've never had anyone tell me they wish they'd worked more hours. Usually people say, wow, I realise how important my relationships are, or whatever it is for you. So we have this big wake-up call, but it's bittersweet because we've also got all this stress to worry about. So I'm not trying to be Pollyanna here and say, just rejoice in all the great things in your life. It's about the balance and making sure you have both. I'm letting the photo be taken before I change that. No, that's okay. She's allowed to. Okay. This is just near Freycinet National Park. Identify what brings you meaning and work out how to have more of that. It's really simple. It is actually that simple, but you have to actually structure it in. It might be that you put in your diary, twice a week you're going to do this thing that you know will bring you joy. It's simple, but you have to actually make sure you do it. Okay. But it's important for me to remind you that courage does not always roar. Sometimes courage is the quiet voice at the end of the day saying, I will try again tomorrow. And that happens for me. I wake up, have all these plans, then something happens, and then I get a call from one of the kids' schools, and I deal with that, and then something else happens, and then whatever, and at the end of the day I go, wow, I actually achieved none of the things I planned to. We have to be gentle with ourselves and go, do you know what? I'm going to try again tomorrow. I'm not going to try and do 10 things tonight when I'm this tired. I'm going to go to bed, get up tomorrow. I need to have that self-compassion. So we need to allow ourselves to have permission to not be brave sometimes. That's okay as well. So here are the tips in summary. In terms of anxiety, we need to really decide on the time frame of which we look forward and just focus on what we can at the time. We need to challenge automatic negative thoughts. We need to know what situations throw us and try and plan for them ahead. We need to take stock of who we are and what's important to us and start saying this is who I am and this is what I need. And we need to stop at different times and say, how has this impacted on me? What do I need right now? And in terms of despair, we need to identify what brings you meaning and work out how to have more of that, but also to allow ourselves permission to not be brave sometimes. And that's my final one. The thing is, we fight like girls, so we're pretty cool when it comes to this. And I have so much admiration for all of you, and it's fantastic to have you here listening. So that's me, and I'm sorry that my voice did all these weird things. So I really wish you well, all of you. Thank you.